don't you mind your own f***ing business, pal?
Animaniacs knows all the facts.
There are a ton of iconic little girl characters in media, like Lisa Simpson, an outspoken little girl who constantly makes a firm stand on her beliefs, Wednesday Addams, who is reserved with her emotion and has a fascination with death and darkness, and is often seen as a goth icon, and the Powerpuff Girls, a group of girls who kick ass and save their own town from evil, but also have their own individual personalities. There are several of these characters that span decades of time, but some, while being around for decades, have become somewhat forgotten. And our first character in this series fits that exact bill. This is Lulu Moppet, more known under the name Little Lulu, a character whose history actually spans a lot longer than many people realize, as if you know of this character, you most likely know her from the show you're seeing on your screen right now, The Little Lulu Show, which aired in the 1990s. It also just happens to be celebrating its 30th anniversary this year. Makes doing this video rather convenient. But the character of Lulu actually starts in the 1930s, as she was created by a cartoonist named Marjorie Henderson Buell, known under the pen name Marge.
Take that, Marge!
Marge started out her career at only 16 years old when she sold a comic to the Public Ledger, a newspaper that was published daily in the Philadelphia, Pennsylvania area. Things would change for Marge in 1934, however, when a magazine named the Saturday Evening Post approached her to make a comic strip to replace another comic that the magazine ran titled Henry by a cartoonist named Carl Anderson, as that comic was going into syndication. So Marge got to work and created a comic, but decided she wanted it to follow a female character as, quote, a girl could get away with fresh stunts that in a small boy would seem boorish. So she created a mischievous girl with loopy curls like she had as a kid, and Lulu was born, and her first appearance shows her dropping bananas at a wedding, causing what I am assuming are the bridesmaids to slip and fall immediately, showing the type of character Lulu would end up being, a lovable troublemaker. Marge continued making these comics into the 1940s, and would expand on them with full-fledged comics, and would introduce other iconic Little Lulu characters, like her friend slash nemesis slash kind of love interest Joe, who would later be renamed Thomas Tompkins, but would be known under the name Tubby, or depending on the adaptation, Fatso, but mostly Tubby. Tubby is a bit of a mischievous character similar to Lulu, but Tubby also leads a gang of boys he dubs the Fellas, who are introduced in the comics a little later. Some of these boys include Willie Wilkins, the muscle of the group, Eddie Stimpson, the brain of the group, who is usually the one coming up with the boys' schemes, mostly when they antagonize their rivals, the West Side Boys, and Iggy Inch. He's not only a member of the Fellas, but he is also Tubby's male best friend and a general grump.
This ain't no secret mission. This is an errand. I've been tricked!
His whole character is more or less just being a prick. Other characters of note that would show up in the comics is Lulu's best friend Annie, who is also Iggy's brother, Gloria Good, the pretty girl in the neighborhood that all the boys fawn over, Wilbur Von Snob, the rich kid who is, as you would probably guess, a snob, and Alvin, the youngest kid, who is frequently babysat by Lulu and is a less annoying version of Caillou, but is still pretty annoying, and personally he is my least favorite character. Most of these characters weren't introduced, or at least formed into who they are known as today by Marge, however, as by the late 40s she would step down from making the comics and put it into the hands of another cartoonist, John Stanley, who worked on comic stories for Bugs Bunny, Raggedy Ann and Andy, and Woody Woodpecker. John handled the storytelling element of the comics, but would be joined by another cartoonist who did the illustrations, that being Irving Tripp, who worked on Bugs Bunny and Tom and Jerry comics as well. The two would be the driving force that would shape Little Lulu into what it is known as today, and would do so through a series of comics until 1959, starting with a 10-issue set of comics under the comic publishing company Dell Comics, specifically under the company's anthology series 4-Color. This is also when the comics would be named Marge's Little Lulu, as even though the creation of these comics were passed along, Marge still had creative control over these comics, as she had the last say with everything. These comics proved to be quite successful, and would spawn a spin-off comic series based around the character Tubby, simply titled Tubby, and lasted 45 issues. John and Irving would continue their tenure with making these comics until 1959, when the comics would be passed on to various different cartoonists, including DC comic artist Arnold Drake, who created the DC character Deadman. The comics would also change to another publisher called Gold Key Comics, an imprint of the book publishing company Western Publishing, both of which are now defunct. Golden Comics actually went defunct in 1984, the same year the Little Lulu comics officially stopped, ending a comic legacy that lasted 4 decades, which is extremely impressive. Now, aside from the comics, Little Lulu also had a surprisingly big number of on-screen adaptations, the first of which came during the comics' early years in the 1940s, as Paramount took interest in the comics and made a deal with March to produce 26 theatrical shorts, which March happily accepted. So Paramount got their animation division, Famous Studios, later renamed Paramount Cartoon Studios, to make these shorts. The easiest way to describe these shorts is a worse version of a Looney Tunes cartoon. Lulu is your typical troublemaker, sort of similar to Bugs Bunny.
Are you the little birdie that's been talking about me? Beat it, small fry. I want to converse with your mother. Did you tell Mandy on me? Aw, I guess redbirds can't talk anyhow.
We also get the first on-screen appearance of Tubby, who for whatever reason is named Fatso, and your typical bumbling fool character, which I guess is sort of part of Tubby's character in both the comics and later adaptations, but these shorts seem to exacerbate it. Like the first short shows Tubby trying to impress the girl in a diner, but is caught by Lulu and proceeds to beg her for her forgiveness by literally getting on his hands and knees and melting down. On top of that, these shorts are as 1940s as it gets, with straight up racism.
Ah, that's good old-fashioned family racism.
Seriously, the first episode has a nanny that is a straight up black stereotype.
Now you done it, you done it, you're gonna catch it good.
And Lulu herself dons blackface. Talk about a crazy way to start out your series of shorts, but it was the 40s, the era of war propaganda, so it is safe to say these shorts were a product of their time. And their time would come and go, as by 1948, Paramount decided to stop producing these shorts as they didn't want to renew the Little Lulu license, as they would have to pay royalty fees. So they created their own character that is similar to Little Lulu, Little Audrey.
2 cups of milk, 4 cups of sugar, and then just a bit of salt. Hey, not so much.
After these shorts, things would be kind of quiet with Little Lulu, outside of continuing the comics and making Little Lulu the mascot of Kleenex and having her appear in magazine ads for Pepsi.
Won't you gentlemen have a Pepsi?
Through the 50s and the 60s. But the 60s would bring old Paramount and their animation division Famous Studios back into the world of Little Lulu, as the company would make 2 more cartoons. The cartoons being titled Alvin's Solo Flight and Frog's Legs, both of which are based on comics of the same name, released during the John Stanley era. Both cartoons have better animation than the original shorts, but are quite basic. Tubby's voice was also changed, which is a little annoying. However, I personally don't like either of the Tubby voices in this era, so it is what it is. That is an issue they fixed later on, but we'll get to that soon. We then get to the 70s, which would be a great decade for Little Lulu, as 2 specials were made by ABC as part of ABC's Weekend Special, an anthology series that featured kids shows that ran from the late 70s to the late 90s. The first special released in November of 1978 is simply titled Little Lulu. The special is just a live-action version of the comics starring real kids, and it is kind of half-assed, as the characters don't even really look like they do in the comic. Like, see this kid in the striped shirt? That's supposed to be Tubby. And the girl in the blue with pigtails? That's supposed to be Little Lulu.
Ugh, you're not even trying!
I understand this is clearly a low-budget production, but couldn't you at least attempt to make the kids look like the characters? Outside of that, it's basically just the little rascals in the 70s. The actual plot of the special revolves around Tubby and the fellas being upset that Lulu and the girls get to go to their summer camp, Camp Wackadoo, as the girls fought for their right to attend this camp by protesting. Once the girls are at the camp though, they are upset, as the boys get to do all the fun stuff, and they only get to do girly stuff like sing. So they convince the camp counselors to let them compete against the boys in all their camp activities. Meanwhile, Tubby finds Lulu's diary she had hidden in a box of chocolates, and it's revealed that she tricked the boys into going to the camp by talking to the boys' parents so they could beat them at their own game. So the boys take on the girls at a tug of war and beat them. The girls then head back to their tent to find it's been ransacked, and they blame the boys, but it turns out to be a bear who comes for revenge. or so they think. So the girls run off and find out the boys ransacked the tent and Tubby read her diary. This leads Lulu to make a bet with the boys where if they win a rowing contest, they get to join the boys' softball team, but if the girls lose, Lulu will leave Tubby alone. So the boys agree and the rowing contest commences. The girls win the rowing contest as Tubby slows the boys down to a complete stop as he has a bag of fudge brownies tied to the boat. Get it? Cause he's fat.
It's funny because he's fat.
And the special ends with the girls playing with the boys on their softball team and the boys coming around to the girls as the girls introduce a new girl that just moved in who happens to be tall and is perfect for when basketball starts. And also the one kid has the hots for her. The special itself is fine for what it is, a low budget, one and done short film. The acting is mediocre at best, and it's kind of a slog to sit through. However, at minimum, it does feel like the story would be an issue in the comics or an episode of the 90s show, which we will be getting to soon, I promise. So it at least has that going for it. A year later, at the end of 1979, they did a second special titled The Big Hex of Little Lulu, which acts as a sequel to the last one. It follows Lulu wanting to form an all-girls hockey team, but she is short on funds for jerseys and equipment, so she convinces Tubby that he is cursed, and the only way it can be lifted is by raising money for the team. Unfortunately, if you want to watch a special though, you're going to have to do a lot of searching, as it is currently considered lost media, with only a 20-second promo being available online, as well as some newspaper ads from the time. There is a comment on the Lost Media Wiki page for the special stating 20 minutes of footage has been found with a Google Drive link, but the link appears to be broken and I cannot locate the footage, so if anyone has a working link to it, please reach out to me on one of my social media profiles. Links on my link tree in the description. I would like to see this footage if it is still out there. The first special was also lost media at one time until 2016, as it was uploaded to YouTube by the YouTube channel VHS Land of Videos. I guess this turned out to be a Lost Media Junkie episode after all.
He said it! He said it!
There wouldn't be much more Little Lulu related in the West this decade, but the East is a different story, as Japan would create their own adaptation titled Little Lulu and Her Little Friends. The animated adaptation was animated by Nippon Animation, a studio known for making anime adaptations of Western stories such as Anne of Green Gables and The Adventures of Tom Sawyer. The show was specifically animated by Japanese animator Fumio Kurakawa. The show ran for 26 episodes and was dubbed in several languages, including English, Italian, Hebrew, Arabic, Spanish, and Brazilian Portuguese. The show is very much what you would expect for a Little Lulu adaptation, with the characters looking like they do in the comics and having similar personalities. The character design does differ slightly from the comics though, as they have a classic late 70s, early 80s anime design to it, similar to the style of Doraemon. The one thing that brings me out of it though is the voice acting, most notably Tubby's voice, as it just doesn't work for this character.
I was 6 pounds thinner when I bought it. I can't wear it now.
In fact, I haven't liked any of the Tubby voices so far. Hopefully that changes soon. Lulu's voice is also kind of annoying. I don't hate it, but it sounds like how a mom talks to their toddler.
Hey, what is it that's troubling you? Come on, you could tell me. Come on.
Let me get in that belly. Let me kiss that belly. I'm gonna give you a flubber kiss. Flubber belly. Pork belly's the way. Give me that belly.
Oh my god!
If you want to watch this anime for yourself, it isn't exactly easy. As similar to our last adaptation, this one is also considered lost media. The original Japanese release is completely lost, but a 16mm reel of episode 6 came up in a Japanese auction in 2020, and some still images as well as a 20-second clip are archived on the YouTube channel Chosen Fellers. If you speak Spanish, Arabic, and Italian, however, you're in luck, as the show has been completely archived in those languages on YouTube. If you're an English speaker like myself, you are more limited, but there are still some episodes, as the first 6 episodes of the English dub are on YouTube as well. Outside of that though, all other dubs as well as the rest of the English dub are completely lost. This rounds out the 70s and Little Lulu related media for quite some time, as the comic, as previously mentioned, would come to an end in the 80s, and outside of some VHS releases of various previous adaptations, the Little Lulu property would lay low for a while. This changes come 1995 though.
Boom, ba-doom, ba-dee-dee-dee, boom. Oh, Lulu, Little Lulu with freckles on your skin. Always in and out of trouble, but mostly always in.
Yes, we are finally getting to the 90s series. So in the 90s, the Canadian animation studio Cinrar, which is now known under the name Wildbrain, produced an adaptation of Little Lulu simply titled The Little Lulu Show. The show, in my opinion, is easily the best adaptation of the Little Lulu comics we ever got. Not only do the characters look the exact same as their comic counterparts, but they act and feel like said characters as well. And the voice acting is also quite strong, with Lulu herself being voiced by Tracy Ullman, who you may remember from her variety show, The Tracy Ullman Show, a show that would be responsible for the start of a little show called The Simpsons. She would only voice Lulu for one season, however, as American-Canadian voice actress Jane Woods, known for quite a bit of voice work, including Francine's mom and Arthur, would take over the role. And speaking of Arthur, Tubby's voice might sound familiar if you ever watched that show.
Right this way, kids. Only 50 cents to see Lulu the Green Girl. Buster, that frozen yogurt looks good.
Binky, we're on for 3, right?
You just make sure you're there.
Yes, it's the voice of Binky Barnes, Bruce Dinmore, and he is easily the best voice Tubby has had so far. In fact, I cannot imagine Tubby without hearing Binky. The show itself follows a pretty simple formula. Each episode is a series of shorts, 2 or 3 of which have voice acting, and then one really short one that has no dialogue and relies solely on visuals, kind of like the really early comics from the franchise's early days. The setup actually works quite well for the show and feels like we're seeing the comic come to life. It is actually a really solid adaptation overall and clearly respects its source material. The characters behave and act how they're supposed to, with Lulu being kind of a troublemaker, but also a leader that always leads the way when the girls need to get back at the boys. Tubby being a similar character but more airheaded, and the other side characters are also just like their comic counterparts. There is one thing that I don't like, however, and that are the smaller segments of Lulu doing stand-up comedy, which is mostly used at the start and end of each episode. The jokes, if you can even call them that, are kind of lame and childish, but it is a kids show, so that kind of makes sense. These segments are clearly supposed to be a parody of how Seinfeld opens, which was a massive show at the time this show aired, but Seinfeld openings made more sense as the jokes Jerry would tell would link to the episode, as the whole plot of this show is how a comedian gets his jokes, using a group of dysfunctional friends to do so. Little Lulu's jokes, however, have nothing to do with any of the segments in the show, and just comes off as annoying and unnecessary.
Here's how to tell if you're a grown-up. Do you like to take a nap for fun? Would you rather have 3 square meals a day than a zillion snacks? Do you write your whole life down on a calendar? Do you lie about your age? Did you ever say, "Oh, darling, this is too sweet"? If you answered yes to most of these questions, you're a grown-up. Or a really weird kid.
I will also say if you're watching the show as an adult, you will not get much out of it, as the target demographic is clearly young kids. If you keep that target demographic in mind though, you will start seeing a better light with this show, and you may even like it a little bit. I actually find it to be a charming slice of life, easygoing show that is overall charming for kids. There is a heavy boys versus girls dynamic similar to the Little Rascals as I previously mentioned, that young kids can relate to, while also breaking that mold occasionally when the story calls for it. Honestly, I couldn't put this show in any sort of top 10 cartoon list, but I also couldn't call it a bad show by any means. If simple stories with simple characters is your kind of thing, I would definitely recommend checking it out. And if you have kids and want a simple show that won't overstimulate them, then consider checking this show out as well. This show ran for 3 seasons with a total of 52 episodes over the course of 4 years from 1995 to 1999. After the show ended, Lulu in general for the most part ended. 2 of the show's main creators passed away, interest in the franchise isn't all that high, and that caused Lulu to fade into obscurity, and it remains that way to this day. But briefly in 2009, a new comic was made and released in Brazil. The series, translated to English, is titled Teen Little Lulu and Her Gang, which is exactly what the name implies, Little Lulu during her teenage years. These comics have a manga style and ages the kids up to 14 years old, and since they're older, it alters their personalities as well. The characters that get the main focus in this comic series are Lulu, Tubby, Gloria, and Annie. Lulu is the heroine of the group, always up for solving cases and mysteries in the school and the town. Tubby is an aspiring rock star and womanizer, dating several women including Lulu, as they have their first kiss in the 50th issue. Annie is a geeky type with a love for technology and video games, and Gloria is a pretty girl who is fashion obsessed and is also much closer friends with Lulu than she was in any other adaptation. The comic actually did really well in Brazil, even becoming one of the most sold comics in the country for a time, but its popularity would fade and eventually the comic would be cancelled after 65 issues in 2015. Just looking at this comic, I will say this had potential to become an animated series, but I think it came out a little too late to properly work in the US or Canada. If this comic came out in the early to mid 2000s, then I could absolutely see an animated series working that is in similar vein to Archie's Weird Mysteries. A show that follows little Lulu characters as teens but has a mystery solving element to it actually sounds like it would be a really interesting series if done right. But that would not happen. After the comics run ended, so did Lulu's legacy. As of the recording of this video, there hasn't been anything done with the IP since then. No new comics, no new shows, nothing. And sadly, that doesn't really surprise me, as I don't know how you would adapt the stories of little Lulu and her friends to appeal to today's kids. A big issue with modern kids is attention spans, as overall, kids' attention spans have become very short, with kids having trouble focusing their attention for even like 5 minutes. And what's most likely to blame is what they're being exposed to today, most notably TikTok. And I know this makes me sound like an old boomer, but when you stop and think about it, it is a serious problem, and it's honestly pretty fucking sad. But on a brighter note, Lulu spawned a legacy that lasted decades, and clearly captured the hearts of many people over quite a few decades. From lovable and memorable characters to fun yet simple slice-of-life stories. Perfect for not just kids, but the kid in all of us. I guess there isn't much left to say except...